Darktide is a game of many evils and many gods, and these are the 7 rules you'll need to follow if you want to survive the Hive. Rule number 1, don't be a hero. You always need to stay with your battle buddies. This is a tale as old as time, and we're going to abuse it in Darktide. Not only does sticking with a battle buddy have a higher chance of you liking them and making a new friend, but it also keeps you safer with a coherency buff that each class has individually, that exponentially increases your compatibilities and your chance of success. And think of it like a real battle buddy. You'll get into less trouble with them by your side, or more, and probably do way less stupid things. And if you do, they'll be around to bail you out. So make sure you always do everything together. Yeah, we actually got some distance on that. Rule number 2, sever the head and the body dies. Every heretic in Darktide has a weak point, and it takes massively increased damage when you hit it. And most of the time, this is as simple as headshotting them, and the veteran class gets an extra bonus to weak points as a passive. So that should tell you just how important it is. So when you do run into big elites, hitting them in the head is the best way for you to get the most damage out so that you never have to struggle. And the exception is this man's right here. His helmet makes him almost immune to headshots from light weapons, but not his body. So that should let you make quick work of him. And when you run into this big man, any part of his skin that's exposed takes full damage, and all of the armored plates take less. And his head takes bonus damage. So when you look at his counterpart with the shield, this is something you'll have to flank to do damage to, because the shield is an unpenetrable fortress. But if you do have a high stagger weapon like the plasma gun, you can knock him back and take him out no problem. But now for our biggest, most armored threat, the Crusher. And this is the strongest elite in the game that isn't a monstrosity boss. And he can barely be damaged by light weapons, so you'll have to pull out the big guns to take him out. And when you run into a horde, swinging for the head is always your best way to cleave through them in a majestic gore explosion that you could only expect from a Warhammer 40k game of this caliber. And now for the monstrosities, and one of the most horrifying is the Demon Host. They do take bonus headshot damage, but they can be hard to hit and extremely dangerous because they only appear during the Blackout event to suck out your soul. So do what you can, and if you have an Ogren with a slab shield, he can tank it in a corner no problem. Now the Plague Ogrens are actually really easy if you have a tank, but even easier if you have a heavy stagger like the Veteran's Grenade, and can be melted almost instantly, even on the hardest difficulties if you just aim for their head. And as for the Beast of Nurgle, it has this massive target on the back that makes it take a ridiculous amount of damage, so you can clean them up no problem. But now for our final threat, the Assassination Mission bosses. If your whole team W keys the boss, you'll beat him to a pulp no problem, because the shield takes bonus damage from melee attacks and it lets you melt him. So if you're shooting at his shield, you're doing a lot less than you could be. Just watch out for elite spawns while you're fighting him, and you'll be able to tear your way through Darktide's hardest enemies with no issues. Rule number 3, sharing is caring. And there are a lot of resources that you have to share in Darktide, between ammunition, med crates, ammo boxes, and medkay. They're all for the greater good, not the Tau greater good, but the Emperor's greater good. And you have to all work together to use them properly. So if you find your team's ammo turning yellow or orange, or even worse, red at the bottom left on their player card, then you can tell if you need to start leaving some ammo behind for your team. And as for the med and ammo crates, you have to make sure you don't waste them, because an ammo crate has 4 charges to it and can reset ammo for your whole team. And the med kit is great for when a battle just doesn't quite go your way, and you can just top your whole team up right after to make sure the rest of the mission goes smoothly. And you should always make sure you actually save a med kit for an assassination mission, because you can literally just W key the boss. You throw it on the ground and all 4 people melee him to death in a couple seconds. And scattered throughout the map, there's going to be these poor servitor guys that they trapped inside of the medkay station. They can never leave, but they're there to heal you. And there's always going to be one right before the final encounter of a mission with 4 charges ready to just top you up. But they're also scattered throughout the map. They're in set locations on every map, but they have a random amount of charges between 1 and 4. And these are insanely important because they're the only thing in the game that can recover your wounds, which are your bars of HP. And that's the amount of times that you're actually allowed to go down. And they will become purple after your wound is used up when you take too much damage or you're holding a grimoire. So always prioritize giving charges to your weakest teammates so they don't get knocked out. And if it's a full 4 reset, just make sure everyone tops up, because most of the time you can never return to them. Rule number 4, always watch your back. Your rear is never safe, because some sick, twisted joke from the Chaos Gods, certainly not the Darktide developers, make a random small insignificant heretics randomly spawn behind you to blast your bussy. Now, sometimes it actually spawns some of the strongest elites, but it doesn't really matter, because even the smallest boys on the hardest difficulties end up breaking your overshield and chunking your HP. And yes, they do just randomly appear out of thin air. So having your audio settings at a level that can help you hear everything really goes a long way for when it actually does work. And I think if enough people complain about it, eventually they'll remove this awful mechanic. But for now, it's really important to make sure you watch your back, because sometimes they can make or break your mission or just really annoy you to no end. Rule number 5, never let endgame be chaos. Now, the endgame of Darktide is very complicated between non-existent numbers with bars and stats that seemingly do nothing and everything at the same time. So it's important to know which weapons, perks, blessings, and curios are actually good so that you can take on the strongest enemies. And I went over quite a few of them in the veteran guide video, but a general rule for all 4 classes is take high damage, finesse, and cleave for melee weapons, and for range take damage, stability, and the weapon's specialty thing. So for a more direct example, the plasma gun would be high damage, charge rate, and thermal resistance, with a reload speed perk and a blaze wave blessing. Or for a bolter, you would want damage, mobility, and reload speed. And if you ever get confused, just try and get things that compensate for a weapon's weakness, and you'll have a way better time. And every chance you get, buy the best blue weapons you can from the shop, because you can upgrade them to be way better at Hadron the Crafter with plasteel and diamantine, which we'll talk about how to get later. And in a future patch, you'll even be able to melt down weapons for their perks and blessings for RNG-related min-maxing. So your shop resets every hour, and your requisitorium resets every 24 hours, with your weekly quests resetting once every 7 days. And some of your best weekly quests are going to be to kill dregs, kill scads, and kill monstrosities. Playing lots of missions is rough. The scripture and grimoires are a lot easier now than they were before, but it's really important that on your main character you get all 5 of these done so you get your bonus, so that way you can use the shop and eventually buy something that might be good. I haven't seen anything yet, but if you get lucky, you get lucky. And all of these things combined together are all just to make sure you can go take on tier 5 damnation endless hordes. So good luck. Rule number 6, movement is king. Being quick on your toes was never so important, and on Darktide, being able to quickly move around will save you quite a bit of damage and keep you alive a lot longer. And by default, your dodge key is bound to the same as jump, so the term noob jump really gets a whole new perspective here. And every single time it happens, you're going to end up dying almost instantaneously. So rebind that key to something that you prefer that isn't the same as jump. Mine is just alt, and it just lets you avoid the majority of incoming damage. And when you weave this into a block that goes into an attack, it's the best way to stay alive when the hordes come crashing down on you. And for those moments when you have too many range mobs suppressing you and pinning you down, sliding behind cover can help you break you out of suppression. So you just be sprinting, you tap control or your crouch, and you slide behind cover. If you slide at a mob, it's not going to do anything. You're going to get stagger locked to death, which hopefully they remove that too. And rule number 7, enjoy the little things. Darktide really is a beautiful game at the end of the day, so just make sure you're searching everywhere on the map so that you can really take in all the sights. But more importantly, randomly hidden on the ground or in crates, there's going to be diamantine and plasteel, which you need to upgrade your weapons and your curios. So not only should you explore, you actually get rewarded for it, and you're going to need a ton of these materials at late game if you want to absolutely min-max giga roll your gear. So those are my 7 rules of Darktide, and let me know if you have any more that we should look out for down in the comments.